Hello, Keal. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I've stumbled upon you on LinkedIn. Can you guess why?
No, go on.
Okay, I won't. I won't. I
Do you want
won't.
me to say the
Yeah,
title?
like there's a very captivating title that's attached to your name.
Yes. I like making statements. I like poking bears. So my LinkedIn actually says on a mission to kill HR and replace it with something more human. So, and it's a phrase you'll find me saying a lot actually, like HR is dead, long live people. It's something that I'm super, super passionate about. Because I just believe that human beings are not resources, and you're making a very powerful statement as a business if you choose to make that not just a job title, but the title of an entire team.
Your business is called Unleashed, but before we
Mm-hmm.
go deeper down the rabbit hole, let's start with the basics.
Yes.
Who are you? What do you do, and why do you do it?
I am a people person through and through. My first ever job title was actually people person. I don't think there's ever been something that quite encapsulates so perfectly what I do. I see people as a role, as a title, as a function that is there to enable and support people to do the best work of their life. So that's kind of what I try to do in my day to day. I work with startups and scale ups on all things people and culture. So that means kind of creating great experiences for people who work in businesses, as most of us have to do. And really, for me, that also means creating places where people can thrive and do things that they love doing and do it in an environment which is supportive and respects them as humans.
This sounds to me
Mm-hmm.
like a pile of corporate cliches that any company can
Uh-huh.
easily slap on their website and
Yeah.
on their job descriptions to attract talent.
God, absolutely. Yeah. You're very right. I think increasingly a lot of corporates and a lot of businesses who don't actually want to put people at the center are now renaming their HR teams people operations or people experience or all of the things under the sun. But I think a deeper shift needs to happen. So a shift away from I see kind of human resources as a very defensive, very compliance heavy kind of we care about managing risk and managing people and making sure that they stay in their kind of tiny little boxes. Whereas I think the skills that you need to be a really good people person, whether internally or kind of doing a similar thing to what we do, are around coaching, they're around design thinking, they're borrowing kind of from customer success and kind of looking at that entire customer experience. So I think maybe I'm too much of a generalist, too much of a jack of all trades, but I love to kind of borrow, things from different functions. But I think that's what we as people need to do, because we are the people who are meant to be our customers are the entire business, right? So we need to understand kind of what they do, but we can learn so much from kind of what all of these different functions are up to as well. So yeah, it's one thing to borrow the name and the language, although I think that's a good place to start, because like I said, I think words are really, really powerful. I certainly kind of believe that, yeah, it makes a very big statement about how you feel about people within your business if you call the team that is meant to be looking after their interests and aligning it with that of the business human resources. So I think the language is a great place to start, but there's so much more that needs to be done to kind of really ideally kill off the function that was HR and move it into something that actually has a tangible impact on businesses and people within them.
I've experienced HR in various departments. I've experienced companies that did not have HR functions.
Yeah.
I felt like I was professionally saved by HR, but I also felt like I've been hurt by HR departments. So I can see the need to reassess the function and its place in organizations. And I'd like us to talk about that.
Yeah.
But I also wanna start maybe another poke, which is, you said design thinking, customer success, people operations. For people who are not living the startup life and might be listening, these are all buzzwords that are absolutely meaningless, and it creates this incestuous conversation and lingo that contributes to the bubble effect of the innovation ecosystem. I think this is why also HR is such a foreign, alien part, because human resources does sound like it's something from a bygone era. But before you started Unleashed,
Yeah.
and before you formed such a strong opinion about how things should be done, you are also, I imagine, an employee someplace, somewhere.
Yes. So, like I said, my first ever job title was actually people person. So I kind of went from studying law at Cambridge and thinking that I was going to go into a very, very structured kind of career path, where actually like it was all kind of laid out in front of me and I knew kind of totally where I was going, to being thrown into actually my first job was at a scale-up company, a travel like tech business. And I guess that in that business, when I first kind of came into it, I came into it as like the second like people person in the London team, and in my opinion, like I think I felt as an employee, but also like as a member of that team, like they'd kind of invested in the people side of things a little bit too late, because I could see kind of the very tangible effects of like not having some really basic kind of structures and like practices in place that just meant that like a lot of unnecessary chaos was caused, and I think like a lot of unnecessary uncertainty as well.
Now you're talking like the consultant, because you see it with a critical mindset of someone who'd seen countless companies and can like really pinpoint the flaws.
Yeah.
But when you experienced it as an employee.
Yes.
So how did it feel back then, not now?
I think.
Take your time. It requires some digging.
Yeah, no, definitely, because I definitely look at it. Obviously, we're all the hero of our own story, and I definitely am looking back on it now with a certain frame of mind.
Did you feel safe walking there?
No.
You didn't feel safe.
I was about to say the word that came to mind actually was quite destabilizing. Yeah, I didn't really feel necessarily, although I got so much autonomy to kind of explore like so many different kind of things in that role, but I didn't necessarily feel, I suppose, like cared for. Like I said, I came from kind of thinking that since I decided when I was 11 that I was going to be a lawyer, because I was really kind of inspired by kind of the work that a lot of kind of, I guess, rebels maybe within the legal system had done to kind of change it and like really be at the forefront of some kind of like progressive change. And I got to university and actually found that like law wasn't for me at all. Like there was a lot of bits of it that I loved. There was a lot of bits of it that I just absolutely detested. And so I knew that I wanted to do something that was kind of more related to people, but like a lot of people who stumble into recruitment or kind of talent or people, HR roles, whatever, I guess all I knew at that time was I want to do something that really has an impact on people, and is about kind of figuring out like what makes people tick and then just kind of helping them get there, right? So but going kind of into that environment where there wasn't a like very well established like people team, there was a really interesting kind of quite unique culture, but like didn't really necessarily feel like there was a lot of things put in place to kind of like just support and kind of care for people kind of when it's your first job, when you're kind of walking in to a business for the first time. Like there's obviously a huge amount of doubt, uncertainty, excitement, kind of all of these like mixed feelings that kind of go on within your head. And I guess you want to know that people have thought about that experience and people can relate to like what it feels like, and I guess it was interesting navigating an environment with like so little structure as kind of that first job.
Thank you for taking the leap back in the time tunnel. I know that some of these thoughts and memories are not accessible to us because A, it's been long since we've thought about them. B, a lot of the coping mechanisms override the negative sensations, and C, it's unpleasant.
So totally.
I had a mentor once that he'd ask me a question. I'm like, you know how it goes. You come back home one day, and he goes, no. It's not you come back home. It's you. You need to speak in the first person. Go back to I. Okay, so I go back home.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, when I had to go back and speak in the first person, the things I said felt like they had more meaning.
Yeah.
I took more responsibility over them when I was saying them, and I kind of internalized what I was saying a little bit more. So I don't do it to guests on the show. I don't force them to speak in the first person, but it's such an interesting exercise.
Yeah.
You know, going back to speaking in the first person and re-experiencing what you've gone through.
Yeah, power of words again. Yeah.
Another experience, and I love it that we can do this back and forth. I was working with youth before their military service, so kids, teenagers, adolescents in their about 18 or 19, just before they joined the army. They took a gap year, and I was working at a leadership development program, and they didn't like having me and the other tutors around in some ways. In others, it was fine, but they're like, you know, we're supposed to be self-reliant. We're supposed to build our independence here. What are you even like? Why are you here? And the way that I framed it to them is like, imagine you're on a skyscraper, right? It's super, super tall. You look down over the edge, and the cars are like ants, and you can feel the wind. And it's so high up that you can actually feel the building almost moving.
Yeah.
And Hannah, I give you a pair of bicycles, and there's no fence, there's nothing to it, there's no barrier. And I like, okay, cycle around. Where would you cycle?
Probably back down into the lift.
Probably back down into the lift, right? You'll try and stay as far away from that shifty ledge as possibly can, right? So if we draw it into a picture, it'll be like tiny circle in the center, as far away from the side. And I'm like, fair enough. This is what I would have done. But let's say that I'm telling you, there's no way you would fall off of that skyscraper. You can cycle safely around the edges of it because there's a barrier that protects you no matter what happens. A gust of wind, and you can cycle safely. Where would you cycle then? Would you be able to appreciate the view, the experience, the air a little better? Yes, 100% we would. This was my role as an HR operations person in an environment that was no HR.
Yeah.
Going back into startup land and understanding the role of the people functions in HR, that. It's enabling people to do their best work, to take risks, to go through adversity and conflict and come out on the other end.
Yeah.
But what you described is, you know, you're a people's person in a company. You're supposed to build those functions.
Yeah.
But is it fair to say that you were left to your own devices, do your thing?
Yeah, after a few months, the kind of person who'd hired me into that role actually left. And so, yes, it really did feel like any training wheels that there had been taken off, which was really exciting, but at the same time, kind of incredibly nerve-wracking because I just had no idea what I was doing. And very quickly, that role also kind of became a bit of a global one, and there was no... I reported directly into a founder, which it's your first job, and and obviously kind of this business had already scaled like quite substantially, and he had no time, and I had kind of nothing to do apart from like make it up and support people in the best way that I could. So it's interesting.
So you had a leader for the business, but you did not have a manager.
Yes.
So sometimes startups pride themselves in the autonomy and the independence and the impact they give their employees. But I would argue that independence without a feeling of security is just as a liability.
Definitely.
And that the other way around, like, you know, making people feel safe at work doesn't necessarily mean micromanagement.
No, not at all. No, like we all have a human kind of desire or need, I think, for autonomy, but at the same level, we also have a human need for certainty. And those things are kind of important in different measures to different people. But yeah, there needs to be kind of a bit of a balance, I think. And certainly for you to feel like you are kind of have any degree of like psychological safety, or you just have any measure of like reassurance that you're doing a good job and you're actually doing work that is of meaning and value and someone is getting the impact of the work you're doing. I think you need kind of that support, which is kind of why I like to like I mentioned earlier, that I view kind of the job of a people person to enable and support people, and I very much view those things in equal measure, because I think you need both.
I want to be super specific, and let's see if we can pinpoint that point in time.
Yeah.
You just joined the company. A few weeks later, your manager leaves. Was there an email or any form of communication saying, guys, meet Hannah Keal, now you're director of HR or something like that?
Absolutely not, no.
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 So it wasn't formally declared?
No.
How did you embrace your role, and how did you like onboard yourself into that?
Yeah. So it was a few. I had a few months kind of with kind of a very like supportive kind of manager, but then after that, like I guess just talking to people, like quite honestly, I had a couple of colleagues like in different offices that I could rely on, but like more than anything else, I just wanted to like, if I was going to be the person that in any way could like help and support kind of and like get people to the place where they wanted to be, then I just needed to get out and talk to them. And I think like ultimately that is good conversations are at the root of so much of like people as a job. But
so the conversations,
yes,
what type of things were people coming to you with?
So like a very full spectrum of things. And one of the first things that I noticed, and this was exactly the same actually when I went into my first head of people role, was just like the level of stress and anxiety and kind of like burnout within the team. And obviously that was something that I felt quite overwhelmed and unable to like deal with initially, because it's quite hard like having those conversations when that is the first kind of thing in your career. But then there was also conversations like about just a lot of kind of problems that I guess like shouldn't necessarily have been problems, but that I didn't necessarily feel like equipped to deal with. So for example, like people finding out like, and it's such a simple problem now, I know, with hindsight to fix, but at the time it felt like really insurmountable. But like people finding out that they weren't getting paid like the same as kind of other people that were doing the same job, and people kind of wanting to hire for their teams, but like not really knowing like what that role should look like because they never hired for it before. And just, yes, lots of uncertainty, like lots of kind of questioning, lots of like, where am I going? Like, what am I doing here? Like, is this the path that I'm meant to be on, like in my career? And again, like as that being your first job, like there was a lot of feeling like I just don't really know how to deal with these questions, so I'm going to ask more questions.
Performance management, talent strategy, compensation policies, I imagine some inter-company conflict.
Definitely, yeah. And also a sense of like, who are we as a business, like what we stand for, I think, like
the proactive stuff.
The kind of the culture, the like internal communication, like that was a global business, and there was quite a lot of just like, I don't really know what this person like over here is doing, and yet like we're all meant to be pulling in the same direction.
I want to be fair to that employer. I want to be fair to them and say that these problems are unavoidable, right? Every company goes through them. So where do you hire the first people's person? You said that they were a little late in investing in people. And that sounds to me like something had broken and they needed fixing. So when should companies start thinking about the formerly known as HR functions?
Yes. I think as soon as they can afford to, quite honestly. I think
afford goes back to priorities. So one company would say, well, a HR person is half a product person, so I can't afford it right now.
No, fair enough. It's hard to put an exact kind of like at this number of people, like you should consider hiring a people person, because it is different for every business. I think it depends kind of like how deliberate you want to be and how much you do want to prioritize being very clear about the kind of culture you want to build. It depends kind of how fast you intend to grow, because I think a lot of the value that a people person can add, like when they kind of are hired like in a business really, really early, is kind of figuring out how to get ahead of all of the problems that come with scaling, right? And it's the reason why Unleashed exists as a business, like because we want to get in there and make sure the problems don't emerge and kind of add the strategic value before you get to the point where you're actually just fixing what is broken. I guess that's what I mean by like as soon as you can afford it. It's about the type of company that you want to build at the end of the day. And I know businesses that have hired a people person when they're 6 people. They would say, quite honestly, was probably like one of the best things that they've ever done. So I don't think there's ever a time that's too early to think about it if you want to build culture in a really deliberate way and kind of get ahead of the problems of scaling. Because, and the reason why I would say that is like, communication and like interpersonal relationships in a business like are really, really important. Like when you kind of are first starting a company, when you're hiring the first people, like those people are going to have a hugely disproportionate impact on the type of culture that you have and kind of ultimately the success of your business as a whole. So when you are 3 people in a room, 4 people in a room, actually like you know what everyone else is working on, like you communicate naturally, like it's a human kind of instinct to do so and to be sharing and to be bouncing ideas off.
Communication is something that happens.
Yes, yeah. And it can happen because you're right next to the person. But when you even get to 10 people in a room, like if you think about the amount of conversations you can have between like 2 of you or 4 of you, like every time you add another person, the amount of conversations that can happen and the amount of confusion that can be created kind of magnifies. So like every person you add like adds at that stage like something kind of fundamental and different kind of to the culture, but every person also adds kind of those additional like complications. So I think part of the value of having that people person early is thinking about the problems that come with that.
Generalize a tad bit now. If I'm way off, tell me. But why do you think founders, especially in tech companies, discount the people functions and keep postponing them?
I think it is slowly changing, actually, I would say. But certainly traditionally, it's been a hire that they've put off, like, right? So I think it's not necessarily seen as kind of at the center of like your first kind of iteration of your hiring plan or like whatever. And I think that is because maybe a founder's mindset is, I want to fix the problem that is in front of me, right? Like that's ultimately like why people start businesses, because they see a problem often, like stereotypically, and they want to fix it. If problems haven't necessarily emerged yet, where are the problems to fix, right? And so I think like investing in kind of the people side of things that early requires like a bit of foresight and a bit of acknowledgement that actually like these challenges are going to come along and it's much better to get ahead of them than be behind them. I think that's one of the reasons. Also, I think traditionally, like when startup founders sometimes think about investing in like any kind of like people or talent function, they think talent first, because they're like, right, the people that have to hire the people, like that makes sense. But then there's this whole like other experience that has to happen. Like I think often there's this strange like alchemy type thinking with founders that you hire the best people and get out of the way and let them do the work, but actually you have a responsibility if you're bringing someone on board in your business to set them up for success and actually like create an environment where they can functionally succeed.
So let me one up that just a tad, because you're saying the mentality is to bring amazing talent and let them do their thing. And this is where the theory or this theory crumbles, is when it comes to culture, because hiring a people's person also sometimes mean delegating the culture aspect. Culture in a startup is more often than not the founder's identity and their behaviors and their values, and delegating that is delegating a part of their personality. So I think in a way that's very hard to give up on very early on, or at least it is perceived to be giving up on.
But I don't think it is. I totally understand what you mean, but I don't think culture should ever be delegated. But what does need to happen, like when more people are added to the business, is it needs to be crystallized, because otherwise it just becomes a series of like behaviors that just like a culture is like essentially like the flu, right? Like it just infects people, like, and if you don't crystallize and take time and care to think about like what you want that to be, then you just end up with like a load of replications of kind of, yes.
It takes intent.
Yeah.
It takes deliverance. And
yeah, your intent has to match your behavior.
And one of the guests on the show said that how did he phrase it? Hold on, I'll find the quote because I've written it down. He said it off camera, but I found it really important. So he said, every organization has culture. It can either be an advantage or a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So putting intent behind it and prioritizing will help make that culture an advantage.
Yes.
And by the way, the guest who said that is Paul Datnell from Work Life, head of operations. Mm-hmm. It's such a mindful company and so aware of the culture that this is, it's his quote.
Yeah.
I want to also stress out the importance of the people's functions. Mm-hmm. You're still not fully qualified to do the work you were doing back in that first role.
Yes.
You were in the position, but you still have to learn so many things. If you made a mistake, what are some of the negative outcomes that could have happened, by putting an unqualified person in that function or not having it at all? Is the company at greater risk of being sued for a misfire?
Perhaps. I think, depends on your view of kind of employment lawyers, whether you view this as a good thing or a bad thing. But like increasingly, it's becoming more challenging, and there are more barriers put in front of people who do want to take action against employers that don't treat them very nicely. So I think actually like the risk of quite a lot, unless it really is quite toxic behavior, is pretty low. I think it's more just that like you risk wasting so much like time. I think startups often talk a lot about like fast pace, like let's get stuff done, like, but actually what you want isn't necessarily pace. What you want is like velocity, right? You want a feeling, and that like it's how people talk about like startup energy, especially at that early stages, as kind of that just sparkiness, that like coming up with ideas and running with them, and kind of like having the freedom to make mistakes and just kind of learn from them, and like moving really like fast. That only works if like people understand like what they're working on and how what they're working on relates to ultimately like where that business wants to get to. So I think the risk, if you don't kind of invest in like any kind of people support early on, is that you sacrifice kind of a way of communicating like that mission to people in a way that like is also relevant to their needs, and also encompasses kind of their needs, their motivations, their what they kind of want to do with their life. And I think that's kind of a real missed trick, basically, because you're never going to get the best out of people if A, they don't see the impact of their work, and B, they don't see like how they fit in, and like how their needs and wants kind of fit into that. So I think you miss out on speed, like on duplication of work, and ultimately like also I think maybe you also like in a very real sense kind of miss out on like the opportunity to work with like amazing people that would have taken your business kind of really, really far. Because I think another classic kind of early stage kind of pitfall almost is like you hire your friends, right? You hire like the people that you know like most intimately, and obviously you do that for a reason, because you trust them, and you can get them excited about this journey. But also like very often you kind of then fall into a cultural trap of kind of hiring all of the same people, and so I think having someone in the business who is being mindful about kind of bringing together the right mix of people, all of that is really, really important. And just also like startups are hard work, right? They're and I don't necessarily mean that in this traditional like startup hustle sense, because thankfully that a lot of that kind of narrative I think is kind of starting to die down a little bit now. But what I mean by that is like it's a lot of, like we were talking about before, with that autonomy like comes a lot of pressure, right? You ultimately like together you're responsible for making this business succeed, and so if you don't have anyone that's looking out for the emotional needs and the mental health of the people in your organization, then ultimately that is also going to have a huge impact and slow you down.
So you did like you've created a checklist of the responsibilities that fall under traditional HR departments. Let's list them in categories. So we had hiring, right? We had unfortunately firing.
Yeah.
What else did we have? We had well-being.
Yeah.
What else comes under the remit of HR?
So kind of creating an environment where people can succeed. So performance enablement, performance management, I like to call it enablement, because that's what it should be about, not kind of micromanaging someone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that people don't usually associate with traditional HR departments that are part of the job description?
So coaching, like, is a huge part. So like you might hear about like business partnering, but in the past, I think traditional HR has done that in quite a functional, reactive way. So like, let's have a chat to some managers every so often and check that no one in their team is kind of like at risk of leaving, and let's try and reactively do something about it. But I think coaching is like, actually, it's nuanced, but it's a very different skill set. It's like, it should be about enabling and kind of like getting people to unlock the answers for themselves, like not just kind of giving them a prescription based on a policy that's somewhere like that no one has read, like being covered in dust. So I think, and it's about kind of being able to like bring out the best in people.
How do you do that as an HR? Because people meet HR when they get hired and when they leave work, and sometimes when they have to fill in an annual survey. But there's more points to meet HR if it's done right.
Yeah. I personally believe that like a good people team is responsible for like or should have touch points on like every single piece of that employee experience, if you want to call it that. So by that I mean kind of like, yes, it should be someone who is guiding you through kind of your onboarding and like making sure that like candidate experience you have before you join the business is as good as it can be. But then kind of it goes beyond that. Like it's about kind of having the structures in place to make sure that people kind of feel supported with their progression and their development, and kind of they actually feel like the organization kind of cares and wants to deliberately invest in those things. It's about kind of making sure that even like a really simple thing like benefits, like so few businesses actually don't just kind of look at what is competitive. Like you should be looking at kind of what the people within your business actually need, and what they want. Like I see like a lot of really kind of quite interesting like novel kind of benefits kind of coming out, like paternity leave, which obviously makes so much sense if like your startup is kind of like a like pet food business, because it's like that's what those people care about. But you need to do the work to kind of understand what that is. And I guess that's what I meant when I was talking about design thinking earlier. It's kind of doing the work to actually understand kind of what the people in the business need and care about and want. So I think that like the people team should be kind of engaging with people like throughout their entire experience. It shouldn't be like the office in the corner that you go to when you have like an issue. So every internal role that I've had, I have just set up like essentially just office hours, actually out of the office in a coffee shop where people feel a lot more relaxed, generally speaking. And the only thing that I've put in the calendar is like, come and have a chat, like, and talk to me about anything you want. And I found that is obviously you kind of have to build the trust and let people know what you're there for in the first place, but actually like the power of just knowing that there is someone in this business that you can come and talk to, like whenever you're really not sure, like whether you can talk to your manager about something or like just having that door open, I think like is a really powerful kind of statement to send to the business about like, actually we're at the center, like we're not somewhere you go to when you're in trouble.
So I wanna test a HR use case here with you.
Yeah.
Someone very close to me, very dear to me, working for a startup, fast growing, really successful, had a clash with a manager who's not even their team.
Yeah.
They said something on a Slack channel, and that manager said something about a nasty comment about how much time off they take and their traveling holidays and stuff like that. Nasty in public. And when I commented, and I said, listen, it's this person, the manager is it's not his territory. He shouldn't be commenting about it. And if he is, he shouldn't be doing it on a Slack that's visible to other people. I think you should take this to HR or at least to your manager. No, my manager won't do anything about it. They're friends. I'm like, okay, so take it to HR. HR won't do anything about it because I'm afraid they'll tell that person, the person who hurt. And she was afraid of approaching HR with something like that.
Yeah.
Is that something you see often?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's something that actually I have to work really hard to proactively address whenever I'm kind of coming into a business, like, because trust and credibility, if you're in a people role, is everything. I work quite hard, I think, to address some of these stereotypes like head on. And a lot of them actually, like, I think are fully deserved stereotypes. Like if you look at kind of big people-based scandals that we've had recently, like a lot of the time, like Uber kind of and sexism scandals and kind of things like that. Actually, like the HR departments often are complicit like in those things, or kind of will run around kind of cleaning up the businesses, kind of bad behavior. So I would be the first to mistrust HR. So I think it's really, really important that people understand kind of in practice, like, what does it mean to be a people team versus a HR team? And like, I work really, really hard to kind of, build that trust and credibility from the get-go, and create that kind of safe space.
If you have in the workplace an HR team that's closer to the negative example we just portrayed, what advice would you give people who feel like they're at an impasse? They don't have anyone to talk to that can help them at work. How do you reach out for help in those tricky, delicate situations when you can't get that in-house?
Yeah, so the flippant part of me wants to say just leave, but obviously I know that's not practical advice for necessarily everyone. Like, we all have to work, generally speaking, for economic necessity. So I guess I would say that, like, actually you as an individual also kind of can have an impact on the culture, right? Your behavior can also be infectious to people. Like, you can also kind of contaminate people with kind of your behavior, because that's who we are as human beings. We mirror the people that are around us. So in that situation, and I've kind of, many friends have kind of come to me with the exact same dilemma, actually, I would always say, try and find someone in the organization who you trust, who you can just speak to kind of as a human being, and try and find kind of who are the advocates like within the business that like also maybe share some of the same frustrations and want to see kind of something different. Like, if that person kind of is in a management position, for example, like, what can you do within your team to kind of create that environment? Because once I kind of in another startup that I worked in, once I started doing kind of those office hours like every week where I just take people off site, actually a few leaders in the business started doing that as well. And so it becomes not a people team thing. It becomes something that people do because they care about and want to listen to kind of the people within the business. So how can you kind of cultivate that? How can you kind of be a bit of an agent like for change? And like, ultimately sometimes someone has to put their head above the parapet and say, like, this behavior is not okay. And actually, in a lot of those situations, and I recognize that it is always so much easier said than done, there is, if you're thinking it, i.e. that this behavior is toxic, this shouldn't be acceptable kind of in this business, I guarantee there are more people kind of out there also sharing that same frustration.
You said something tremendously important. The instinctive advice was just leave. But it's not because you're taking it lightheadedly. It's because you understand the limitations of changing other people and how hard it is could be to swim upstream and to drive change in what feels like a hostile environment, and to push back against your higher ups. But for employers, this would be really big red flag, because the employees who have suffered something like that would just leave. And when they're sitting down for an exit interview, if they even have one, they won't tell you it's because that manager said something that I found unpleasant or hurtful and didn't have anyone to speak to. They'll say something else. It's a different opportunity.
Yeah.
It's been my time to go. I'm looking for a different challenge, more money.
Progression. Yeah.
So going back to, 30 minutes ago in the conversation when we said companies invest in the HR functions a little too late, it's you've already lost a few people.
Yeah.
You've already scarred a few of the people you've worked with.
Yeah.
By the time someone is vocal enough, like the problem is big enough now that it's visible, and not only visible, it's inignorable.
Yeah.
So the just leave would be the instinct of anyone that knows what's good for them. And we mentioned, I think off the camera, we started speaking a little bit about millennials. I don't want to go into the millennial conversation. I think it's becoming increasingly irrelevant.
Yeah.
But the just live is upside down of the just do it.
Yes.
It's like, I know my self-worth. I deserve to feel good at work. And if I don't get that here, I'll find a different place to get it in. And I think that's huge. Now, we've started with a list of things that HR is generally in charge of: hiring, firing, well-being, performance enablement. And now that list had gone. Coaching, working with the managers, employee experience, the benefits, career progression, helping companies and founders stay true to their cause and true to their values, conflict resolution in cases. And this is a lot.
Yeah.
This is a lot for any organization. So I think now will be a good time to talk about what Unleashed brings to the world, and the startup nightmares that maybe Unleashed helps companies avoid, dodge, minimize, deal with.
Yeah.
It's your realm. So what would be a good way to start unpacking this?
I think some of it we've actually already dived into, right? When we were talking about how once kind of issues emerge within businesses, if they invest in people teams too late, it becomes very, very tough to kind of change what's going on and kind of repair some of the wounds almost that can kind of emerge based on kind of how people have been treated already. So Unleash exists to kind of build foundations for scaling, like through people and culture. And what I mean by that is kind of we want to get in and set up some really basic, very scalable kind of things so that people actually, when they're entering into a business, they feel supported, they feel like they're being invested in. And so, we look at kind of stuff across the entire like people experience and try and create, help founders create kind of businesses where people actually want to be a part of.
How is a company different in her post-Unleashed experience to what it was before?
I guess like we help founders with like 3 core things, which I think is like a good way to get to how the company will be different. So like how the hell you like hire really great people who are right for your business when you don't really have a brand,
and when money is not the only thing you can offer. Okay,
definitely. Like how you then kind of have a team that is happy, productive and high performing, which is obviously what every founder in the world I think ideally wants. And then how you kind of go from being a doer, an executor, like the person who founded the business because they care about the thing or the problem, to being a leader of people, which is quite a shock to the system, I think, for leaders. So ideally, that is kind of what we're trying to achieve, kind of those places where you have the right people in the right jobs at the right place and the right time, and they kind of feel able to do their best work.
So helping them hire without being a recruiter.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So communicating kind of what is the ding in the universe that you're trying to make, right? So I think we were also talking a bit earlier about how increasingly like people are attracted to businesses that align with like their purpose in life, like their values, kind of causes that resonate with them. And every kind of startup, especially, like is trying to do something that's a little bit different and something that's a little bit unique. So it's about kind of finding the people, getting the message out there to those people specifically, that this is a business that you should be aspiring to work at, I guess. Yeah.
There's a point in time where management and leadership diverge. Is that something you have a say in, a part in?
Yes, but I think interestingly enough, like often in startups, you kind of have to do both at the same time. Like you kind of have to wear like both of the hats. So I think one of the traditional distinctions I've heard between like management and leadership is like managers are in charge of the head and like leaders are in charge of the heart, right? They should be the person at the like front of the organization, kind of setting the vision, setting the tone, like ultimately kind of infecting. I keep using that word with
it's
regards to culture,
it's
but
the coronavirus in the news that's
maybe so.
Putting that word in here. I'm sure that 2 months from now you will be using a different term.
Yeah. So they're the people kind of inspiring and kind of motivating, whereas managers are kind of I guess seen as quite more functional and task orientated. But I think like we have actually like a management and leadership program that we deliberately have called a management and leadership program because I think like they have some interesting high performing behaviors that are like relevant to both of them, but most importantly because you have to wear like quite a lot of those hats.
I remember at the past workplace, I needed to give a score to my manager, and they asked me about whether or not my manager is inspiring. And I found it so weird that they asked me that. Like, we had a super prominent CEO, very prominent VPs, super charismatic senior directors. What's inspiration got to do with selling ads on the internet? I was really feeling sorry for them. This is another requirement that is imposed on them.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, the language people use, again, isn't it? Because I might interpret that in, like, the context of management. Like, is this person someone who you actually look up to and, like, want to learn from?
Yeah.
Like, right? So, but yes, it's interesting.
I don't know. So let's do something. I've never done this before here. We've listed a few things about HR. I'm going to give you one category after another and tell me what is the biggest thing that you think startups are getting wrong about it.
Yeah.
Okay. If you need a second to think, no problem. But what is the biggest misconception startups and founders have about hiring?
So I definitely say that, like, still hiring in your own image is like a huge thing for startups and founders. So I hear a lot of like quite arbitrary requirements from founders about like, I only want to hire people who have come from a top tier university, or I only want to hire like people who have worked at these 3 companies, or the list goes on. Sure. Right. But I think you're cutting off so much of like an incredible talent pool just because of these arbitrary requirements that probably are reflective of your own background or kind of something that you aspire to, right?
So hiring in your own image is one.
Yes.
Is there any other misconceptions about hiring?
Yes, actually, I think not taking account of culture enough is a really like big one. So it's the classic like assholes. Like, will you tolerate kind of a competent jerk kind of thing? But I think, like often kind of founders can sometimes be wowed by people's kind of experience on paper, right? Like, without thinking about, does this actually translate to my culture? Like, is this going to have kind of where has this person come from, and kind of how is that going to transplant itself to here?
Competent jerk captures it really well.
Yeah, but also like I kind of like to say about this, like, performance does not translate. Like, just because you are great in like one job at like one maybe quite established company does not mean that is going to like instantly kind of just mean you're successful here, right? And so I think like beyond kind of just actually assessing for kind of values or like culture fit, you actually also should take a bit of time to understand like what is the culture and what is the context that like this person has come from, and what are they bringing with them, like what assumptions are they making about kind of the new environment that they're going to find themselves in, and how can I help set them up for success if I hire them by kind of helping them make that transition. Yeah.
Next category, firing.
You know what, I think like maybe kind of a bit of a like myth around firing is that it has always got to be this kind of awful, painful thing that is terrible for everyone involved, no matter what. Like, actually, it's never going to be necessarily the best experience in the world, but like actually if the chances are that if someone is like performing really badly, is like not getting on with the team, then they like are feeling that really hard as well. And so actually just like having honest adult conversations about like this might not be working out, rather than kind of going down the route of making it some like, I think this is even for people, this is kind of a area where quite a lot of them like will go back right to the kind of, I'm going to sit down and read you a letter now. And like, how much of a human experience is that? Like, I think actually it can be a really positive thing even when someone's not leaving the business under the best circumstances necessarily, like they're going to go off and kind of use that as a springboard for doing something else that they're probably a much better fit for. I would say it's a misconception that firing people is necessarily this kind of awful, terrible.
I think you just got unleashed a bunch of customers by saying there is a better way to go about it, and let's see. Yes. Misconception around well-being.
Throw bananas at it. So I think there's a lot of businesses that are addressing kind of well-being in quite a superficial way, and focusing on the those kind of inconsequential, or not inconsequential because it's nice to have bananas, but maybe kind of using kind of this quite surface level stuff to kind of tick a box or address what is actually kind of a very like complex set of needs. So again, like without understanding kind of what the people in your business actually care about or want.
Care about is important. It's really important.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really important. Is it a dog sitter?
Yeah.
Is it remote work, or is it like really food in the office? So,
yeah.
Okay. So well-being. Yeah. I wanted to ask what is well-being, but I think well-being changes drastically between the organizations. So.
And also, I think between the people, right? Like, and I also like do quite a lot of work on. I've just qualified as a mental health first aid instructor, and it's kind of something that I'm incredibly passionate about. Kind of creating an environment where people actually can thrive, but like being well or being kind of like mentally healthy like means so many different things to different people, and without kind of understanding what it means to the people within your organization, and then anything you do really is going to be surface level.
Okay, here's a tricky one. What are some myths about performance management or enablement? It's tricky because performance is measured very differently between the different teams and the different seniorities. So I don't think those are one size fits all answers.
No.
But would it be fair to say that the myth is that performance, all aspects of performance are measurable? Is that a myth?
Yes, probably, because you can metricize a lot of things, but you can't necessarily metricize the impact of people's behavior, positive or negative, on kind of the people around them. So yeah, I guess that might be kind of a myth. I think like startups really, in my experience, kind of detest any kind of like performance improvement planning is kind of a horrible term for it, but like any kind of when they see someone underperforming, not just kind of doing the easy thing and kind of having them leave the business, or the other easy thing, which is to ignore it and hope that it goes away, which I see an awful lot of. I think there is kind of this real like doing either one of those things will slow us down, but actually like that absorbs the business from a lot of responsibility, and it absolves like that person's manager from a lot of responsibility. Like I think the real conversation that you should be having if someone in your team is not performing is like, what are both of us doing wrong here? Like, how have I not supported you and set you up for success? Like, what can I do to kind of get you to the level that my expectations are at? So I think that conversation like is so important from like a power balance.
That's profound.
Yeah, point of view. Like it's very.
An employee's performance issue is a manager's performance issue.
Totally.
That is profound. Next category, coaching.
I think there's a lot of actually misinformation about what coaching actually is.
What is coaching?
Coaching is asking the right questions to get someone from A to B, basically. So it's not telling them what to do. It's not, neither is it kind of therapy. It's not trying to analyze what they've done in the past to, give them some kind of insight. It's not mentoring, which is kind of like sharing your experience with someone and kind of having the, here's what I do in that situation. It's just kind of asking the right questions to help someone kind of clarify their thinking, lay out the options available to them on the table and kind of get there. So I think coaching is kind of a buzzword at the moment, and it's increasingly like it's an industry that is kind of like rightly so exploding because it can have a huge disproportionate impact on people's lives. But I think the starting point needs to be understanding what it actually is.
Excellent. Last category in our little game is myths about career progression.
Oh, so yes, this is a really quite an easy one because I see like the same common things like cropping up actually in a lot of businesses that we work with. So firstly, that it's linear, not kind of lateral. So I think traditionally a pitfall that I see a lot of startups making is promoting into management positions like people who are just really, really good at what they do. And a lot of times that ignores the fact that they actually like probably were really enjoying what they were doing. And now you've put them in this management position. They're just like trying to desperately to get back to doing what they were doing.
Spoken like someone who actually experienced it.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, yes, we've definitely got to let go of this fact that the only way you can progress is kind of vertically. And often that means straight into management. Actually, there's a million different routes to progression. And a lot of what people want is actually to just increase the mastery of their skills and deepen kind of their knowledge and feel like they are learning. So we've got to like widen kind of this.
How do you cope when startups the volume of work is greater than the resource and manpower you have to accomplish it?
Mm-hmm.
So there's the upside, plenty of opportunities for growth, and the downside is sometimes people are being pushed into roles rather than pulled into roles.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a give and take here? Like employees should be tolerant of actually doing work they don't want to do because it's for the greater good of the company? Is that even top of mind for employees?
Yeah. So I think like obviously we all have to do some things from time to time that we don't particularly like enjoy or want to do. But I think it would be stupid of employers not to be cognizant of what they're asking of their people in the name of the business, basically, because ultimately like if you are continuously working on something that frustrates you, gives you anxiety, and is not kind of aligned with anything to do with how you'd like to progress or what you'd like to learn about, then that's going to affect your performance as well. So
a tiny part of this conversation that can happen that I don't think it happens a lot, and that's listen, I'm going to ask you to do this role for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
I know it may not feel like a promotion, or I know that you didn't ask to be doing that, but I need you to do that. Let's reassess where we are in 3 months or 6 months. Or tell me when it becomes unbearable, so I'll know to push for change.
Mm-hmm.
What an honest, beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Do that for me. I'm sorry I'm putting you in that position. Do that for me. Let me know when it's unbearable, or how much energy you have in the tank to do that.
Yeah.
And we'll work towards the replacement, but I can't solve it right now.
Yes. Yeah. And I think you mentioned something really great there, which is just like call it out, right? Like often I think another thing that I see happening a lot in startups is kind of, you're good, I'll give the jobs to you because like you're great and I know you can handle it. And then there's more and there's more and there's more and there's more piled on. And people, especially who are quite early in their career, just are like, yes, I'll do all the things because I'm super excited to do all the things.
And because
and then
your identity is being built. Your identity is being built. Like, oh, Hannah, you're so amazing. Take this extra project on. Oh my God, Hannah, you're remarkable. I don't know how you do what you do. Take this extra project on. And saying enough is enough is a nick in the identity.
Yeah.
Because oh my God, he's gonna take or she's gonna take that appreciation away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is priority boarding to the burnout airplane.
Yes. Yeah. You can move fast and break things, but you shouldn't never ever consciously or unconsciously move fast and break people. Because ultimately the people who started off as your biggest advocates and your hardest, most kind of crucial people will then start to resent everything that you ask them to do.
So let's go, now that we've done this express run through some of the challenging areas of HR, I want to go back to the personal aspect of it.
Yes.
You started Unleashed how long ago?
So I joined Unleashed as its founder's business partner about a year and a half ago.
A year and a half ago. What was your last role or endeavor before?
So I was head of people at a prop tech startup called Good Lord.
Coming into the work that Unleashed is doing with as much passion as you, I'm sure there's a story. There's an origin story that is waiting to be told.
Yeah, so weirdly enough, like how I met Anouk, my business partner, is such a like serendipitous kind of like odd thing. Like, so we actually spoke for the first time when like talking about a software platform, like because I'd been asked to do one of those like weird referral calls where you're like, oh, I like this product, like you're a customer of us, like why don't you talk to other people who might like to buy our product, which yes, so we spoke for the first time then, and obviously had a really nice chat, but it was a call on that software platform, and then when she first started kind of going out on her own and doing Unleashed, she tried to hire me for one of her clients. We met up to talk about kind of the role, and spent about 5 minutes talking about it, and the rest just talking about what she was doing, because I found it so exciting, and I was like, this is like the thing that I have felt the need for so hard. And then so we spoke about the role. I said I wasn't really interested in leaving Good Lord at that time, and then I remember she messaged me on LinkedIn about kind of, it must have been at least 6 months later, and I remember taking the call like in a cupboard at Good Lord, which was actually just filled with like stationery and like had that awful like terrible cheap kind of like, I'm definitely not soundproof kind of phone like across the I knew instantly, like she hadn't said in her message what she wanted to talk to me about, but I kind of knew instantly that this is what it was. And yeah, she was like, I've decided that I'm onto a good thing here, because she'd originally started doing it as a bit of consulting on the side, like a bit of a lifestyle business. And yes, she was like, it's time. I'm committed to this. I want to grow it. I think we can help so many businesses. And yes, we met for breakfast. I asked her about 900 questions, and the rest was just absolute history.
Hannah, I'm happy for you, and I'm happy for Anok, and I'm happy for Unleashed. But I'm a little dissatisfied for my own sake, because I thought I am gonna get some sort of a juicy trauma. No, I did not get the juicy trauma.
No, just a very like nice buddy story.
So we're not gonna go back all the way to your childhood or your past life to find it, but I do want to ask something else.
Yeah.
Head of people in a well-funded startup that already has a closet for stationery, that's usually a good sign.
Yeah.
And you decide to leave that for a startup. So my question is, what did you have to give up in order to start becoming who you are now?
I'm quite an anxious person, and so going into that first role, like at One Fine Day, the startup that I was originally at, was a real shock to the system, because I actually thought certainty was like very, very important to me. And I feel like my career after that has just been a gentle process of just letting go and figuring out that actually we can try it might screw it up, but ultimately everything when you do it for the first time is an experiment. Like, I've dealt with lots of imposter syndrome throughout my career, because every single role that I've had, I've felt like it's literally my perfect job, but just about 5 to 10 years before I should be allowed to have it, right? So I think definitely I had to let go of even more of that. And there was a big element, right, of because we had kind of only a few conversations, but they were the kind of conversations where you just kind of click so hard with someone, but like that still kind of gave me that same like imposter syndrome feeling of like, why me? Like, you could pick any of the fantastic people, and a lot of whom are way more experienced than I am. Like, why? So I guess like it was letting go of some of that and taking like a bit of a leap of faith and letting go of even more of that certainty and embracing kind of a bit of the serendipity and a bit of the like going with the flow. And certainly, like, again, it's just been a process of letting go of a lot of that baggage, a lot of the like certainty, and just letting yourself like see what happens. So I definitely feel that has been a process. And so what motivated me to join at Unleashed was the potential to have an impact on like so many more businesses, because I was so proud of like what I did at Good Lord. Like, we were like one of the biggest things for me was like we were the first ever startup to be recognized by Mind, the mental health charity, for like our work on kind of creating openness around mental health at work. And I was like, oh, we can, if I kind of went and did this thing, like we could create kind of a world where that is the norm, like that is just kind of what happens, like businesses just take account of these things. Like also there's a very real chance that you won't, right? Like I'm sure like everyone kind of who's watching this knows that actually like less than 5% of startups actually succeed. And up until like the reason why I decided to kind of grow it was obviously because we were kind of being referred to other businesses and like being introduced, and actually to date, like all of our growth has been that organic. But there's always that kind of fear because we've taken no funding, we're completely bootstrapped, of like, oh, but what if that ends like at some point? Because ultimately, yeah, it's pretty scary, like not doing any kind of active business development and not really knowing like is the next client going to like come in or not. So I think that was a bit of a leap. It seems to be working out okay so far because we've gone from just the two of us to like 8 within the team within just under a year and a half. But it's still definitely a fear.
And it seems like what started off with a first job that caused so much anxiety, you're closing a circle now by A, helping companies alleviate some of it, but B, also facing it as an entrepreneur and not as an employee, and it gives you a chance to fix all the things that you saw that were broken. And on behalf of everyone who's listening to the show, I want to thank you for taking that brave step forward and ask you if there's anything else you'd want to share with us before we wrap up.
One of my favorite like quotes of all time, and this is very cheesy and also goes back to like 11-year-old me who wanted to be a lawyer, but it's from kind of To Kill a Mockingbird. Also got a very cheesy tattoo of a mockingbird on my thigh, but the quote is kind of, you never really know a person until you try and climb into their shoes and walk around in them, and that's kind of like always really resonated with me. And it's that sense of kind of curiosity that I think has got me to this point in my career. So if there's one thing that I guess I could encourage people or founders to do, it's like to adopt that sense of deliberate naivety and to step into kind of asking more questions and listening to kind of what actually floats people's boats and what they're kind of experiencing on a day-to-day basis, because I think it's just about the most powerful thing that you can do when you're founding a business and building a team. So and on a cheesy quote, why not?
Not cheesy at all. Super valuable for the people who are hearing it in the right time. I hope they pick up the phone now and call those people who are working underneath, who help them execute their vision, and ask them the simple questions. How are you? How are you feeling? How do you feel coming into work? What can we do to make work better for you? And with that, I want to thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been one of the fastest flying 90 minutes we've had on the show so far. Your passion for what you do is contagious, and we want to see...
Infectious, again. It's coronavirus, it's coming back.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Peace out.
Yes! Okay, nailed it. Elbows, always.
How was it?
Look at the elbows. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah?
It was good. Yeah. Oh.